The signal came through at 03:47 Universal Time, cutting across every frequency that Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station had been scanning for the past 8 years. Rita Hayes almost missed it. She had been reviewing old data logs, trying to find patterns in cosmic background radiation, when her equipment started screaming. Not beeping, screaming. The sound that filled the Antarctic facility was unlike anything she had heard before. It was desperate, raw, and unmistakably alive. Rita's hands flew across her console, isolating the frequency and running it through translation protocols that humanity had barely begun to understand since joining the galactic community. The message resolved itself in fragments. Words appeared on her screen in standard galactic script, then converted to English through systems that still felt like magic to most humans. "Anyone, please, our children. They're dying. The swarms came 3 cycles ago. We have no weapons, no defense. This is Nalani Colony World. Coordinates attached. If you can hear this, we're dying." The message repeated, over and over. The same desperate plea cycling through the void, hoping anyone would care enough to respond. Rita's supervisor arrived within minutes. Then the facility director. Within an hour, the message had reached Earth's Unified Defense Council, and within 3 hours, every major government on the planet had convened emergency sessions. The galactic response came faster than expected. Multiple species sent official communications to Earth's diplomatic channels. The messages varied in tone but shared the same basic content: stay out of it. The Nalani were too far into contested space. The Kreth swarm was too dangerous. Intervention would destabilize regional politics. Some species were more direct, suggesting that humanity should focus on understanding its place in galactic civilization before attempting heroics. Ambassador Lena Okoye read these messages aloud during the emergency council meeting. She stood in the center of a holographic conference room, surrounded by the faces of leaders from every continent. Some appeared in person, others projected in from their respective capitals. All of them looked tired. Humanity had spent 8 years trying to prove they weren't the dangerous primitives that most galactic species believed them to be. The Valorian Collective advises against intervention. Okoye continued, scrolling through another message. They suggest we lack the experience for this type of operation. The Trail Union reminds us that the Nalani chose to settle in unsecured territory and must accept the consequences of that choice. Admiral David Cross, commander of Earth's primary defense fleet, slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make several holograms flicker. "They're telling us to let children die because of politics." "They're telling us to know our place," Okoye replied quietly. "We've been part of this community for less than a decade. Most species still remember their first contact reports about us. Wars, weapons, aggressive expansion across our own solar system. They're afraid we'll make things worse." "Or they're afraid we'll show them up," muttered General Park from the Sol Command Center. The debate raged for another 2 hours. Every argument that had ever been made about humanity's role in the galaxy surfaced again. Some leaders worried about overstretching their forces. Others questioned whether Earth had the right to intervene in alien affairs. A few wondered if this was a trap designed to test humanity's restraint. Rita watched the proceedings through a live feed from her station in Antarctica. She had been asked to remain on duty, monitoring the Nalani signal for any changes. It hadn't changed. The same desperate words repeated endlessly, a digital ghost crying out in the dark. She pulled up the coordinates that had been attached to the distress call. The Nalani Colony World was 47 light-years from Earth. Their star system sat in a region that galactic maps labeled as disputed territory, which apparently meant that nobody wanted to defend it, but several species claimed ownership rights. The planet itself appeared to be a garden world, rich in vegetation, with 3 moons and a stable orbit. Rita zoomed in on the most recent surveillance data that Earth's long-range probes had gathered. The images were weeks old, but they showed a world that should have been thriving. Instead, she saw burned scars across the major continents, orbital debris where stations used to be, And on the largest moon, something that looked like massive hives spreading across the surface like a plague. The Kreth swarm. Rita had read the limited intelligence reports available on them. A hive mind species that reproduced rapidly and consumed resources with terrifying efficiency. They moved through space in living ships, establishing breeding grounds on moons and asteroids before overwhelming their target worlds. Most species avoided them entirely. Those who couldn't simply evacuated and mourned their losses. Admiral Cross appeared on her screen suddenly, his face filling her monitor. "Hayes, you're the one who found the signal." "Yes, sir." "In your professional opinion, how long do they have?" Rita looked at her data. The signal strength had decreased by 3% in the past 6 hours. "Based on degradation patterns, I'd say the primary transmission station will fail within 72 hours. After that," she didn't need to finish the sentence. Cross nodded. "The council just voted, we're going." Rita felt something release in her chest that she hadn't realized was tight. "Sir," the other species said. "I know what they said," Cross interrupted. "But here's what I think. We spent millions of years evolving on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. We fought ice ages, predators, diseases, and each other. We learned to survive because we had to, and somewhere along the way, we learned that the strongest thing we could do was protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The galaxy can think whatever it wants about us. We're going to answer that call." Rita watched as her screen filled with new data. Fleet movements, deployment orders, mobilization schedules. Earth's military apparatus was waking up, and it was moving fast. Admiral Cross's face appeared one more time. "Keep that signal alive, Hayes. Keep it broadcasting. I want those people to know that someone heard them. Someone is coming." The transmission ended. Rita turned back to her console and began boosting the signal, adding Earth's own relay stations to amplify the Nalani's desperate cry. But this time, she added something new to the transmission. A response in Galactic Standard script. "Message received. Help is coming. Hold on." 47 light-years away, she hoped someone was still alive to receive it. The fleet assembled faster than anyone thought possible. Ships that had been scattered across Earth's solar system converged on the launch coordinates within 18 hours. Crews that had been on leave were recalled. Supplies that had been earmarked for training exercises were redirected to combat operations. The entire planet shifted into a mode that most species only achieved during existential threats to their homeworlds. Colonel Anna Reeves stood in the tactical planning room aboard the flagship Resolute, studying holographic projections of the Nalani system. Around her, representatives from 15 different nations argued about approach vectors and engagement protocols. The noise should have been chaotic, but to Reeves, it sounded like music. These people had spent their entire lives preparing for threats to Earth. Now they were planning to defend a world they had never seen. "The Kreth control 3 key positions," Reeves said, her voice cutting through the debate. The room fell silent. "They've converted the moons into breeding grounds. Intelligence suggests each moon produces approximately 50,000 drones per cycle. They're using the moons as bombardment platforms, raining biological pods onto the planet's surface." A Brazilian commander named Silva leaned forward. "What about the planet's defenses?" "Minimal," Reeves replied. "The Nalani are a peaceful species. Their entire defense strategy consisted of early warning systems and evacuation protocols. They never expected anyone to actually attack them." "Because the galaxy has rules," added Dr. Yuki Tanaka from her position near the biological analysis station. "Most species conduct warfare through formal declarations, limited engagement zones, and negotiated settlements. The Kreth don't follow those rules. They're a hive mind. They consume, reproduce, and move on." Sergeant Roy Bennett, who had been silent until now, spoke up from the back of the room. "So we're going to fight bugs that don't negotiate, on a world full of civilians who don't know how to fight, while the rest of the galaxy watches and judges us." "That's about right," Reeves confirmed. Bennett grinned. "Sounds like Tuesday." The comment broke the tension in the room. Laughter rippled through the assembled officers, dark and knowing. These were people who had survived conflicts on Earth, a planet where evolution had been a constant arms race for billions of years. They understood something that most galactic species had forgotten. Sometimes survival meant embracing violence with precision and purpose. The fleet entered slip space 6 hours later, 63 ships carrying 12,000 personnel. Every vessel was packed with supplies, weapons, and equipment that had been designed for defending Earth from threats that most aliens considered paranoid fantasies, kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, biological countermeasures. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing things that wanted to kill them first. During the 3-day journey through slip space, the fleet transformed into a mobile military academy. Veterans shared tactics with rookies. Engineers modified weapons based on limited intelligence about Kreth biology. Medical teams studied Nalani physiology to prepare for possible civilian casualties. Every spare moment was used to prepare, adapt, improve. Dr. Tanaka became the most popular person on the Resolute. Her xenobiology lectures were packed with soldiers eager to understand their enemy. She explained how the Kreth communicated through pheromones, how their drones operated on instinct directed by higher-level controllers, how their entire species functioned as a single organism spread across millions of bodies. They're efficient, Tanaka explained during one session. Every action serves the hive. They don't understand concepts like mercy or negotiation because those ideas don't benefit the collective. They see other species as resources to be harvested. "How do you kill something like that?" asked a young pilot named Casey. "You disrupt their communication," Tanaka replied. "Or you eliminate their command structures, remove the higher-level controllers, and the drones become confused. They'll still be dangerous, but they'll lose coordination." Captain Omar Bashir, squadron leader for the fleet's fighter wings, raised his hand. "What if we don't fight them the way they expect? Most species engage in formation, right? Organized battle lines and strategic positions. What if we just didn't?" Reeves smiled. "Go on." "Earth's military history is full of unconventional tactics," Bashir continued. "Guerrilla warfare, ambush strategies, psychological operations. The Kreth might be a hive mind, but they're still operating on biological programming. Programming can be confused." The idea spread through the fleet like wildfire. By the time they were 12 hours from their destination, every unit had developed contingency plans that violated standard galactic combat doctrine. They would hit fast, hit hard, and hit from directions the Kreth wouldn't predict. Admiral Cross addressed the entire fleet the night before they dropped out of slip space. His face appeared on every screen throughout all 63 ships. "Tomorrow we arrive at a world under siege," Cross began. "The species we're going to help don't know us. Most of them probably don't even know Earth exists. They didn't call us specifically. They called out into the void, hoping anyone would answer. Well, we answered, not because we expect gratitude, not because we want territory or resources. We answered because 8 years ago we joined a galactic community that taught us about the universe, and we want to pay that forward. We answered because those distress calls mentioned children, and any species that protects its children deserves a chance to survive. We answered because it's the right thing to do." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was steel. "The galaxy is watching. They expect us to fail. They expect us to be too aggressive, too reckless, too primitive. They're probably right about the first two, but we're not primitive. We're humans. We evolved on a death world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us, and we're still here. Tomorrow we show the Kreth what that means." The transmission ended to absolute silence, followed by a sound that echoed through every corridor of every ship. The sound of 12,000 people preparing for war. Bennett sat in the barracks with his squad, checking equipment for the 10th time. His weapons were clean. His armor was fitted. His medical kit was stocked. Everything was ready. "Think they'll surrender when they see us coming?" asked one of his soldiers. Bennett shook his head. "The Kreth don't surrender, but that's okay. Neither do we." The fleet dropped out of slip space at 06:00 Universal Time. The Nalani system appeared on their sensors, and every screen filled with the same image. A beautiful garden world wrapped in smoke and fire, 3 moons glowing with bioluminescent hives, and between them, an enemy that numbered in the millions. Admiral Cross's voice came through on all channels, calm and certain. "All ships, this is Resolute. Welcome to Hell, let's get to work." The Kreth attacked within seconds of the human fleet's arrival. Their response was mechanical, predictable. 3 waves of bioships launched from the nearest moon, moving in perfect formation toward the new arrivals. Each wave numbered in the hundreds, their chitinous hulls reflecting the system's star like moving constellations of death. The Kreth expected defensive formations. They expected the humans to establish a perimeter and protect their larger vessels while smaller ships engaged at range. That was how every species fought. That was the pattern. Humans ignored the pattern completely. The fleet scattered, not in retreat, but in a chaos that looked like madness to any observer familiar with galactic naval doctrine. Ships broke formation and accelerated in seemingly random directions. Fighters launched and immediately dove toward the planet instead of engaging the incoming waves. The Resolute, the flagship that should have remained in protected space, charged directly at the largest concentration of enemy vessels. The Kreth bioships attempted to adapt. Their formation shifted, trying to intercept the scattered targets. But humans didn't scatter randomly. Every ship had a specific target, a specific mission, and they executed with precision that looked like chaos only because nobody else fought this way. Captain Bashir led his fighter squadron through the atmosphere of the nearest moon. The bioluminescent hives covered the surface like infection, pulsing with movement as millions of drones prepared for deployment. His ships skimmed low, weapons blazing, targeting the largest structures. Behind them, explosions bloomed in the strange light of the Kreth breeding grounds. "This is Red Squadron," Bashir reported, his voice steady despite the G-forces he was pulling. "We've got their attention. Moon One's defenses are activating." "Copy that, Red Squadron," Cross replied from the Resolute. "Keep them busy. Ground teams are deploying now." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Bennett's unit hit dirt in the middle of what used to be the Nalani capital city. The drop pods had landed in a rough circle around a massive structure that intelligence identified as a civic center, probably a gathering place or government building before the Kreth arrived. Now it was a tomb. The city was wrong in ways that Bennett's brain struggled to process. Nalani architecture was organic, flowing, designed to work with nature rather than dominate it. Buildings grew like trees, with living walls and gardens integrated into every structure. Or at least, they used to. The Kreth had covered everything in resin-like secretions, turning the beautiful city into a hardened nest. "Spread out," Bennett ordered. "Look for survivors, watch for drones." His squad moved through the ruins with weapons ready. They had trained for urban combat on Earth where every corner could hide an enemy. This was similar but worse. The Kreth resin was everywhere, making the ground sticky and uneven. Strange sounds echoed through the converted buildings, clicking, scraping, the sounds of a hive at work. They found the first survivors 30 minutes into the sweep. A group of Nalani civilians huddled in what remained of an underground shelter. There were maybe 40 of them, including a dozen younglings. The Nalani were tall and slender, with scaled skin that shifted between green and blue depending on the light. Their eyes were large and expressive, currently filled with terror that transformed into confusion when they saw the humans. One of the adults stepped forward, speaking in rapid Nalani. Bennett's translator struggled for a moment before converting the words to English. "You're not Kreth. Who are you? How did you get here?" "We're humans. We're from Earth," Bennett replied, hoping his translator was working both ways. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." The Nalani stared at him. One of them, an adult with deep blue scales, began to laugh. It was a broken sound, edging on hysteria. "Help! The galaxy abandoned us. The Valorians said it wasn't worth the resources. The Trell said we chose to settle in contested space. Nobody came. Nobody was supposed to come." "Well," Bennett said, We don't really care what the galaxy thinks. You called for help. We answered. That's how this works. A youngling, barely waist-high to the adults, pushed through the crowd. The child moved toward Bennett with the fearlessness that seemed universal to younglings of any species. The child reached up and touched Bennett's armor, scales reflecting the glow from his helmet lights. "Are you warriors?" the child asked. Bennett knelt down to the child's level. "Yeah, kid, we're warriors, and we're going to keep you safe." The shelter's entrance exploded inward. Kreth drones poured through the opening, their mandibles clicking with predatory rhythm. Each drone was the size of a large dog, covered in black chitin armor, with multiple limbs that could serve as either weapons or locomotion. They moved with unnatural coordination, a small part of a vast intelligence directing their every action. Bennett's squad didn't hesitate. Gunfire filled the shelter, deafening in the enclosed space. The drones fell, but more kept coming. These weren't sophisticated enemies. They were biological weapons programmed to swarm and overwhelm. "Get the civilians back," Bennett shouted. "Corporal Way, defensive position at the rear exit." Way, the squad's medic, grabbed the nearest Nalani adults and started pushing them toward the back of the shelter. The civilians scrambled to obey, grabbing younglings and moving away from the entrance. The Nalani were faster than they looked, which made sense. Herbivores from garden worlds usually were built for running from predators, even if they hadn't seen predators in generations. Bennett's squad formed a firing line, cutting down drones as fast as they appeared. Modern military rifles, designed to punch through body armor and synthetic materials, absolutely devastated the biological armor of the Kreth. But for every drone that fell, two more seemed to take its place. "Running low on ammunition," reported one of Bennett's soldiers. "Then we go loud," Bennett replied. He pulled a grenade from his belt, armed it, and threw it into the mass of approaching drones. The explosion shook the shelter, and when the smoke cleared, the entrance was blocked by Kreth corpses and rubble. Silence fell. Bennett counted to 10, then 20. No more drones came. "Everyone okay?" he asked. His squad reported in, minor injuries, nothing critical. Bennett turned to the Nalani civilians. They were pressed against the far wall, staring at the humans with expressions that Bennett couldn't quite read. Fear? Awe? Some combination of both. The adult with blue scales stepped forward slowly. "You killed them, you just killed them all." "That's the plan," Bennett confirmed. "The galaxy told us you were dangerous," the Nalani said quietly. "They said humans were aggressive, primitive, that you hadn't evolved past violence." Bennett considered that. "They're probably right, but here's the thing. We choose where to aim that violence, and right now we're aiming it at the things trying to kill you and your kids." The Nalani looked at the younglings, then back at Bennett. "Why, we're nothing to you. Earth is 47 light years from here. What do you gain from this?" Bennett thought about the question. He thought about Admiral Cross's speech. He thought about Rita Hayes sitting in Antarctica, the first person to hear the distress call. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a world that had too many conflicts but had somehow learned to come together when it mattered. "Because you asked for help," Bennett said simply, "and we could provide it, that's enough." The youngling who had touched his armor earlier ran forward again, this time wrapping small arms around Bennett's leg in what might have been a hug. The gesture seemed to break something in the other Nalani. Several of them began making sounds that the translator marked as crying, though they were different from human tears. Bennett's radio crackled. "All ground units, this is Resolute. Primary orbital assault successful. Kreth forces are regrouping. Prepare for second wave. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. Bennett looked at his squad, then at the Nalani. "All right, people, we've got 15 minutes to fortify this position and evacuate civilians. Let's move." The Nalani stepped forward without being asked. "Tell us what to do," said the blue-scaled adult. "This is our world, we'll fight for it." Bennett smiled. "Then let me show you how humans fight." Dr. Tanaka made her discovery in the most unlikely place, a captured Kreth drone that had malfunctioned during the first wave. The creature was still alive, its nervous system firing erratically, trying to reconnect with the hive mind that no longer responded. She worked in a converted cargo bay aboard the Resolute, surrounded by biological scanning equipment and sample containers. The drone was restrained on an examination table, its chitinous body twitching with residual nerve impulses. Most scientists would have killed it immediately. Tanaka knew that living systems revealed more than dead ones. "There," she whispered, watching her scanner display. "You're still trying to communicate." The drone was releasing pheromones in complex patterns, attempting to signal to controllers that weren't present. Tanaka's equipment captured and analyzed each chemical signature. After 6 hours of continuous observation, she found the pattern. The Kreth didn't just communicate through pheromones, they navigated through them. Every drone, every controller, every bioship followed chemical trails laid down by higher-level intelligence. If you disrupted those trails, you could make an entire swarm effectively blind. Tanaka ran to the bridge, her findings clutched in a data pad. Admiral Cross listened to her explanation with the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades making life-or-death decisions. "How do we disrupt it?" Cross asked. "We synthesize a counter-pheromone," Tanaka explained. "Something that mimics their command structure but provides contradictory instructions. It won't kill them, but it will confuse them, make them turn on each other, attack their own forces." "How long to produce it?" 12 hours if we use every biolab on the fleet." Cross nodded. "Make it happen, we'll buy you the time." On the planet's surface, that time was measured in blood and determination. The Kreth had adapted to human tactics faster than anyone expected. The drones started moving in unpredictable patterns. The bioships began targeting human supply lines. Worst of all, the Kreth had begun converting captured Nalani structures into fortified positions. Sergeant Bennett's squad had linked up with 4 other units, forming a defensive perimeter around what the Nalani called the Sanctuary. It was a massive underground complex designed as an emergency shelter, now housing over 3,000 civilians. The entrance was a natural cave system that the Nalani had expanded and reinforced. It was defensible, but only if the humans could hold the approaches. The Nalani who had chosen to fight alongside the humans had proven surprisingly capable. They were herbivores, yes, but herbivores from a world that had once known predators. They remembered, somewhere in their evolutionary memory, what it meant to run and hide. Now humans were teaching them to stand and fight instead. A Nalani named Breen had emerged as a natural leader among the civilians. Breen had been a teacher before the invasion, responsible for 30 younglings in a community learning center. Now Breen organized supply lines, coordinated civilian evacuations, and somehow managed to keep people calm despite the constant sounds of battle from above. "The younglings are asking about the humans," Breen told Bennett during a brief lull in combat. "They want to know why you came." "What are you telling them?" Bennett asked. "That you're crazy," Breen replied, but there was warmth in the words. "That humans are the only species in the galaxy insane enough to fight for strangers." Bennett laughed. "Yeah, that sounds about right." The lull ended with the scream of air raid sirens that the humans had set up. Kreth forces were massing for another assault. This time, the drones weren't alone. The bioships had deployed something new, controller-class warriors. Larger and more intelligent than the standard drones. Each controller directed hundreds of smaller units with terrifying efficiency. "Positions," Bennett shouted. His squad spread across the defensive line, weapons ready. Beside them, Nalani civilians who had chosen to fight took up improvised weapons, sharpened metal poles, acid compounds derived from local plants. One enterprising group had figured out how to turn agricultural equipment into flamethrowers. The Kreth came like a living tide, flowing over the ruined cityscape with single-minded purpose. Human weapons blazed, cutting down the front ranks. Nalani defenders used their natural speed to hit and retreat, luring drones into kill zones. But there were too many. For every Kreth that fell, 3 more took its place. "We're being pushed back," someone shouted. Bennett assessed the situation in seconds. They couldn't hold this position. The line would break, and when it did, the Kreth would pour into the sanctuary. 3,000 civilians, most of them younglings, would be slaughtered. He made a decision that would haunt him or define him, depending on whether they survived. All units fall back to secondary positions. Bennett's squad will hold the main approach. "That's a suicide mission," Corporal Way said flatly. "That's an order," Bennett replied. "Get those civilians evacuated to the deep shelters. We'll buy you the time." His squad didn't argue. They understood. This was what soldiers did. They stood between the innocent and the darkness, and they didn't move until everyone else was safe. The other units pulled back, covering the civilian evacuation. Bennett's squad of 12 soldiers positioned themselves at the narrowest point of the approach, where the Kreth would have to funnel through to reach the sanctuary. They had maybe 20 minutes of ammunition, 30 if they were lucky. Breen appeared beside Bennett, holding a sharpened pole. "I'm staying." "No, you're not. You need to protect those younglings." "There are other adults who can do that," Breen said. "You humans have a saying, don't you, about standing together?" Bennett wanted to argue. He wanted to order this civilian to safety, but he saw the determination in Breen's eyes and recognized it. This wasn't bravado. This was someone who had decided that their world was worth dying for. "All right," Bennett said, "but you follow my orders." "Yes, Sergeant." The Kreth attacked with everything they had. Wave after wave crashed against the human position. Bennett's squad fired until their weapons overheated, switched to secondary weapons, then went to melee when the ammunition ran dry. They fought with knives, with rocks, with their bare hands when nothing else remained. Breen stayed at Bennett's side, fighting with a ferocity that would have seemed impossible 3 days ago. The teacher had become a warrior, protecting younglings in the only way left available. The attack lasted 17 minutes. To Bennett, it felt like hours. When the Kreth suddenly withdrew, Bennett couldn't understand why. Then his radio crackled with Dr. Tanaka's voice, breathless with excitement. "We deployed the counter-pheromone. The Kreth are turning on each other." Through the smoke and fire, Bennett watched as the Kreth forces began attacking their own units. Controllers fought drones. Bioships fired on ground forces. The hive mind was tearing itself apart. "Fall back," Bennett ordered. His squad, what remained of it, retreated toward the sanctuary. They were covered in Kreth blood and their own, exhausted beyond measure but alive. Breen limped alongside him. "Is it over?" Bennett looked at the chaos spreading across the battlefield. The Kreth were in full disarray, but there were still millions of them. And somewhere in orbit, their command ship remained intact. "Not yet," Bennett said. "But we hurt them bad." The counter-pheromone worked for exactly 47 hours before the Kreth adapted. Dr. Tanaka had predicted they would, but she had hoped for more time. The hive mind was learning, evolving its communication protocols to filter out the false signals that humans had introduced. By the time the sun rose on the 3rd day of battle, the Kreth were coordinated again. And they were angry. Admiral Cross stood on what remained of the Resolute's bridge. The flagship had taken heavy damage during a bioship assault, and half the systems were running on backup power. But the ship was still flying, still fighting, and that was what mattered. "Long-range sensors are picking up something," reported the sensor officer. "Multiple massive contacts emerging from slip space at the system's edge." Cross felt ice form in his stomach. "How many?" 17 capital-class bioships. Each one is 3 times the size of anything we've encountered so far. And there's something else, something bigger, much bigger. The main display updated, showing the incoming vessels. Cross had spent his entire career preparing for threats. He had planned for invasions, for disasters, for existential dangers to Earth itself. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer scale of what was entering the system. The Queenship was 15 kilometers long, a living vessel that dwarfed every human ship combined. It pulsed with bioluminescent organs, and sensor data showed it was teeming with billions of Kreth organisms. Behind it, The 17 capital ships took up escort positions. They brought their entire hive, Cross said quietly. Everything we've fought until now was just the advance force. Colonel Reeves appeared on his screen from the planet's surface. Her face was covered in dust and blood, but her eyes were sharp. Admiral, ground forces are reporting increased Kreth activity. They're pulling back from established positions. It looks like they're waiting for something. They're waiting for Mama to arrive, Cross replied. He looked at the display showing their own forces. 63 ships had entered the system. Now 37 remained operational. They had lost over 3,000 personnel. Every ship was running on fumes, every unit was below strength. They had been fighting continuously for 3 days. And now they faced an enemy force that could wipe them out without effort. Cross's communication officer looked at him, waiting for orders. The young woman's hands were steady, but her eyes asked the question everyone was thinking: do we retreat? Cross thought about the 3,000 Nalani civilians in the sanctuary. He thought about the younglings who had started following human soldiers around, calling them sky warriors in their language. He thought about Breen, the teacher who had become a fighter. He thought about Sergeant Bennett and every soldier on the ground who had volunteered for this mission. He thought about Earth, 47 light-years away, where Rita Hayes was still monitoring their signals, where billions of humans were watching this battle unfold through delayed transmissions, where humanity's place in the galactic community was being decided by what happened in this system. "Send a message to all ships," Cross said. "Open channel, standard galactic frequencies. I want everyone listening to hear this." The communication officer nodded, and Cross began. "To speak. Attention Kreth forces. This is Admiral David Cross of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are attacking a peaceful world that asked for our help. You are killing civilians. You are destroying younglings. We came here to stop you, and that mission hasn't changed. You can leave now, or you can find out why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. Your choice." The Queen ship's response came immediately. It wasn't words. It was a biological broadcast, a pheromone signal so strong that it registered on human sensors. When Dr. Tanaka translated it, the message was simple: submit or die. "They're not interested in talking," Reeves said. "Good," Cross replied. "Neither am I. All ships. This is what we're going to do. It's crazy, it's probably going to kill us, but it's the only play we have." He outlined his plan. As he spoke, he watched the faces on his screen shift from despair to disbelief to a kind of reckless determination that was uniquely human. When he finished, there was silence. Finally, Captain Bashir spoke up from his damaged fighter. "Admiral, that plan is insane." "I know. Half the fleet won't survive the approach." "I know. We'll be violating every galactic warfare convention that exists." "I know that too." Bashir grinned. "Then let's do it." The plan was simple in concept, horrifying in execution. The human fleet would split into 3 groups. The first group would engage the capital ships in a frontal assault, drawing their attention and firepower. The second group would scatter and use hit-and-run tactics to confuse the Kreth coordination. And the third group, led by the Resolute, would do something no sane species had ever attempted. They would ram the Queen ship. Not a glancing blow, not a desperation move. A calculated high-speed collision designed to cripple the massive vessel and disrupt the hive mind at its source. The Resolute would become a 15,000-ton kinetic weapon, and everyone aboard knew they probably wouldn't survive the impact. "All non-essential personnel to evacuation pods," Cross ordered. "That means you too, Dr. Tanaka." "I'm staying," Tanaka said. "If we're going to hit that thing, you'll need someone who understands Kreth biology to target the most vulnerable sections." Cross wanted to argue, but he saw the same look in her eyes that he had seen in Breen's. These were people who had decided that this moment was worth everything. "Fine, but when I give the evacuation order, you go. Understood?" "Understood, sir." The fleet moved into position. The Kreth capital ships advanced to intercept, exactly as Cross predicted. They were powerful, coordinated, and completely confident in their superiority. They had never fought humans before. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. Human ships danced through Kreth formations, using tactics that defied logic. They rammed bioships. They detonated their own munitions at point-blank range. They turned every vessel into a weapon, every sacrifice into an advantage. Colonel Reeves watched from the planet, coordinating ground forces while the space battle raged above. "They're tearing the fleet apart." "No," said Bennett, standing beside her. "They're buying us time. Every second they hold that fleet is another second for civilians to evacuate. At this rate, there won't be anyone left to evac them." Bennett looked at the sky, where human ships burned like stars. "Then we better make sure those seconds count." The Resolute accelerated toward the Queenship, and Admiral Cross smiled. "All hands," he announced. "It's been an honor." The Resolute's collision with the Queenship created a shockwave that registered on sensors across 3 star systems. The flagship struck at 40% light speed, punching through the Queenship's biological armor and driving deep into its core structure. The impact should have destroyed both vessels instantly. Instead, something unexpected happened. The Resolute's reactor, damaged but still functional, breached inside the Queenship's primary neural cluster. The resulting explosion didn't just destroy tissue. It severed the hive mind's central control node. Every Kreth organism in the system, from the smallest drone to the largest capital ship, suddenly lost coordination. Admiral Cross had evacuated with his crew at the last possible moment. Their escape pods scattered across the system, picked up by surviving human ships and even a few grateful Nalani vessels that had been hiding in the outer planets. Cross watched from a rescue ship as the Kreth fleet began to tear itself apart. Without the Queen's coordinating intelligence, the Hive reverted to base programming. Different sections of the swarm identified each other as threats. Capital ships fired on their own escorts. Drones attacked controller-class warriors. The breeding grounds on the moons began consuming themselves in a feeding frenzy. "It's working," Dr. Tanaka said from the medical bay where she was being treated for injuries. "The hive mind can't function without the Queen. They're not individuals. They're parts of a whole, and we just killed the brain." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Bennett watched the sky light up with explosions. Kreth forces that had been advancing on human positions suddenly stopped, confused, and then turned on each other. The relief was so sudden that several soldiers collapsed from exhaustion they had been pushing through on pure adrenaline. Breen emerged from the sanctuary, scaled face reflecting the light of dying bioships above. "Is it over?" "Yeah," Bennett said. "I think it is." The cleanup took weeks. Human engineers worked alongside Nalani civilians to clear the Kreth resin from buildings. Medical teams treated wounded from both species, learning each other's biology through necessity. The remaining human fleet maintained orbital security while damaged ships limped toward repair stations. The galactic community's response came in waves. First was silence. Then came observation ships from a dozen species, keeping careful distance but clearly monitoring the situation. Finally, the Galactic Council sent an official delegation. Ambassador Akoi met them in orbit, aboard one of the few human ships still fully operational. The Council representatives were a mixture of species, all of them looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Ambassador Akoi," began the lead representative, a Valorian named Trell. "The Council has reviewed your actions in this system." And Akoi asked calmly, "You violated 17 different engagement protocols. You deployed weapons that most species have banned. You risked starting a full-scale war with the Kreth Collective, and you did all of this without authorization from any established galactic authority." "That's correct." Trell seemed thrown by her directness. "You don't deny these violations." "Why would I? You asked us to stay out of it. We chose to help anyway. The Nalani are alive because we made that choice. If that violates your protocols, then your protocols need updating." Another representative spoke up, this one a Trell diplomat. You must understand the concern. Humanity has been part of our community for less than a decade. Your species is aggressive, unpredictable, and prone to violence. This action proves that you're not ready for. Stop, Akoy interrupted. I'm going to save us all some time. You're afraid of us. You've been afraid since first contact. You see a species that evolved through constant conflict, and you worry that we'll bring that violence to the galaxy. Well, you're right. We are violent. We are aggressive. Earth taught us to be that way because it was the only way to survive. But here's what you don't seem to understand. We choose where to direct that violence. We aim it at things that threaten the innocent. At forces that prey on the helpless. At anyone who thinks the strong can simply take from the weak without consequence. If that frightens you, good, it should. The delegation fell silent. Finally, Trell spoke again, and this time there was something different in his voice. Not fear, but perhaps respect. The Nalani have formally petitioned for a defense treaty with Earth. The Council wanted to warn you that accepting such a treaty comes with responsibilities. We're aware, and you'll accept. Akoy smiled. Representative, we traveled 47 light years to answer a distress call from people we'd never met. We fought a war we had no strategic reason to fight. We lost thousands of personnel protecting strangers. Do you really think we'd abandon those same people now? 3 months after the battle, the Nalani world had begun to heal. The Kreth resin was slowly being removed. New structures were rising beside the old. And in the center of what had been the worst fighting, the Nalani erected a monument. It was simple, a stone marker with 2 lists of names. On one side, the humans who had died defending their world. On the other, the Nalani who had fallen fighting alongside them. At the top was inscribed a phrase in both languages. They answered the call. Rita Hayes visited the monument during Earth's first official diplomatic mission to the planet. She stood in front of the names, thinking about the signal she had detected what felt like a lifetime ago. That desperate plea that had started everything. A Nalani youngling approached her, scales shimmering blue-green in the sunlight. The child couldn't have been more than 3 years old in human terms, young enough that the war would be just a story to them someday. Are you from Earth? The youngling asked in careful, practiced English. Yes, Rita replied. My parents say the Sky Warriors saved us. They say humans came when no one else would. Rita knelt down to the child's level. Your parents called for help, we just answered. Will you answer again, if we call again? Rita thought about Admiral Cross's speech, about Sergeant Bennett and Breen fighting side by side, about the Resolute's final flight, about everything humanity had learned about itself during this mission. Yes, she said simply. Anytime you call, we'll answer. That's what friends do. The youngling smiled and ran back to its parents, who were watching from a distance. They approached Rita and bowed in the Nalani gesture of profound respect. Thank you, the parent said, for everything. You're welcome, Rita replied. But really, thank you for giving us the chance to be who we wanted to be. That night, Rita returned to Earth's temporary embassy and filed her report. She included everything: casualty numbers, political implications, resource expenditures. At the end, she added a personal note. The question was never whether we could help. It was whether we would choose to. We made our choice, and in doing so, we defined ourselves for the entire galaxy to see. We are not conquerors. We are not warlords. We are protectors. And when anyone calls for help, Earth will answer. The report was forwarded to Earth's Unified Defense Council. It was read by every major government. It was analyzed by military strategists and debated by diplomats. But the most important readers were the billions of humans who saw it as a public document. They saw what their species had done. They saw the cost and the consequence. And overwhelmingly, they agreed this was who they wanted to be. 6 months after the battle, a new distress call reached Earth, this time from a mining colony in a different sector. Before the message even finished transmitting, Fleet Command was mobilizing a response. Rita Hayes sat at her station in Antarctica, monitoring the signals. She heard the call for help and she smiled. She knew what was coming. She had helped start this. Humanity had awakened and the galaxy would never be the same. The sleeping giant had risen, and it had chosen to stand guard over those who could not stand alone. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, there were beings who heard that and felt hope for the first time in generations.